Hello and welcome to this session of Employers' Rights and Responsibilities, formerly known as the unit ERR. Now, I'm going to just discuss what ERR means to you as a learner, and we'll look at some of the headings that we're going to cover during this section. We'll look at some of the statutory rights and responsibilities. And within that, we'll look at things such as contract of employment, age discrimination, anti-discrimination, working hours, maternity, paternity, absence, sickness, data protection, and a little bit around health and safety. We'll then look at procedures and documentations within your organisation. And for that, we're going to look at things maybe around contracts of employment, anti-discrimination, working hours and entitlement, sickness, data protection, and again a bit of health and safety and the forms that mean stuff to you there. We're going to look at some sources of information and advice, or advice and guidance around your organisation, and that's going to be looking at some internal sources of advice and guidance and some external sources of advice and guidance. We're going to move on about your occupation areas and the types of organisations that they fall in, and then look at some of the career pathways that may be there, and probably just some examples loosely around that, and look at some of the representative bodies that support and work within the sector. Now, it's important for you to understand that every part of your role has some kind of employers' rights and responsibilities. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you where you can find all of that information on our website and get you to start using our resources as well. So if you just want to go onto our education's website and we'll find your ERR workbook to get you started. So from the main website then, down to Learner's Voice, we value your comments, and we do. And we go to here, submit your work. And then here, we're going to go on to workbooks. And there we have our ERR workbook and PDF. Now, whilst that's loading, and the up-to-date version, so you can type in and save. It's important that you have this message on the top which says you can save data typed in this form. So let's just have a look at the ERR. Some information read out. So here it talks about your ERR and a bit about health and safety. And what it wants you to do is it wants you to fill in some information there. So again, so you can type directly into those spaces. And you can see that you start on there and we go through General 1, so we go through Section 1, and there's some activities for you to do. Now here, you can see you've got a picture activity, and I'm going to minimize this. So I'm going to give you a bit of an Adobe lesson as well through ERR. So here you can see it says circle as many health and safety hazards as you can. And you're all going to be saying to me, but Steve, it's Adobe, how do I do that? Well, if you go into comments, and here you can click your circle, and you can obviously use your circle, and again use your circle to highlight the issues. Or alternatively, you may wish to just use comments and type. And then you can see, then click on your next, and you click on it once, and you can see, I don't know why I'm pointing to the screen because you can't see me pointing, but anyway, you can see that little speech bubble, and you might want to stick that one there, and again, there you go. So when your assessor clicks on that, you can see that you've answered that. Okay, so there's two ways you can do it. You can either draw and use your drawing markups, or if you've just got this little speech bubble up at the top, you can just drop that on. Alternatively, if you wanted to type onto it, you could just hit your T and your highlighter pen. No, is it the T and the highlighter pen? I might be lying. Add text and comments. It's not letting me add. Is it that one? Is that text box? Alright, okay, yeah, so it's that text box there, and you could just type in on top. So that's how you can type into Adobe in PDF. Okay. Again, here, I want you to answer, and you just go through, key in your answers. There, you can tick the 3 correct ones, whatever you think they are, and run through that book. So you can see it's a well-illustrated book, just running through all the things to do with your health and safety and your rights at work. This one requires you to line up. So there you can use your arrows. See what I'm doing? So I'm just clicking on my things there and just drawing that along. There, about moving and handling, and so on, so forth. And you just go through, complete those, and it's going to feel a little bit repetitive to some of the stuff, but that's okay. This is really just to affirm that your complete understanding, and you've got a really good understanding about employers' rights and responsibilities. And the thing is, it's not just you that you need to consider. If you're a supervisor or a manager or anything like that, you know, this is really good practice for you to obviously give your staff as an induction, show that they understand their responsibilities. And you can go through and you can see that that book is quite a big book. I mean, it's 36 pages in total. And then you just sign and complete. So that's the task that needs to be conducted. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to there and come off screen, and I'm just going to say hi. So I'm Steve. I'm one of the lead QAs around the apprenticeships, and my role is obviously to make sure that you're provided with the right information. So I've got in front of me just some basic information that you're going to probably find useful. The first one is obviously that you have a right to a contract, and a contract of employment can be verbally agreed or in writing, and it's required by law to contain certain information such as your pay, your expectations, and again, it's legally binding on both parties from the employer and the employee. A contract of employment comes into force as soon as a firm offers employment has been made and accepted, even if the agreement only been made in verbal, e.g. at an interview. So sometimes I get quite a lot, well, I've not ever had a contract. Well, you should have one, but it's not actually necessary, because as long as you've agreed those terms and conditions, you've actually agreed to your contract of employment. A contract of employment needs to relate certain things, such as your notice period, your salary, your wages, benefits, hours of work, your disciplinary procedure, and your grievance procedures. So there's some things there that you need to consider. It outlines your terms of employment around whether it's fixed terms, full-time or part-time, and any changes to the contract must be followed in line with a fair process, and that you're given time to agree the change and obviously appeal it if you're unhappy. There are things that you can obviously do if you're unhappy about your terms and conditions of employment, and you can raise those with the Citizens Advice Bureau or even your tribunals. My advice to you, obviously, is if you have a problem around your contract of employment, is first of all speak to your manager and your HR manager, and hopefully they'll be able to help you out. There are 3 types of employment status, which indicates a person's right to rights and responsibilities, and that's as a worker, an employee, or a self-employed person. So employees are generally people that have full-time contracts of employment with an employer. You're given a contract of employment with clear terms and conditions. A worker may be somebody who works under a variety of contracts and conditions, and they have different sets of rules and procedures. And a self-employed person is somebody usually who has declared themselves to HMRC as a self-employed person, and they are still entitled to certain rights and responsibilities, and they're entitled to be protected under law around health and safety and welfare. And all of those really are governed by rules and procedures, and fall under the business within the EU, and fall under the tracks with the tribunal services. So if you have a problem, you obviously have the right to appeal there. So looking at things within your contract of employment, it's important that legislation exists around to protect terms and conditions of employment, and that terms and conditions are fair, and that everybody involved in a contract has the same bill, they have rights to pay and the same conditions, and that falls under the Equal Opportunities and Discrimination Acts. And when you go through it, just try to consider some of the things that you may see and some of the things that you hear where fairness needs to be applied. We said at the beginning that we would look at some discrimination or anti-discrimination around contracts of employment, and one of those are around the Equality Act 2010. And the 2010 Equality Act basically makes it an offence and illegal to treat anybody different on race, sex, sexual orientation, disability, religion, beliefs, gender, reassignments, pregnancy, maternity, marriage, civil partnership and age. And they're called protected characteristics under the Equality and Diversity Acts. Therefore, it is illegal to treat anybody different under sex discrimination when either recruitment takes place, so that's looking for the staff and the way that you're recruited into a company, around your terms and conditions of employment and who you are as an employee and your T's and C's in the contract that we've just out. Your payment and your benefits, so therefore you shouldn't be treated any less favourably based on any of your protected characteristics. That you have access to equal opportunity in training, and that you're treated fairly to be able to apply for that training. And that promotion and transfers, redundancy and dismissal all remain areas where equality of opportunity remains key. Employers cannot discriminate under the Equal Opportunity Act against the following criteria when recruiting. So it's important that application forms now are free from any areas where the protected characteristics can make it obvious who they are. Under the interview arrangements, to ensure that you're interviewing, you're being asked competency-based questions based on set standards and performances, rather aptitude or proficiency tests, job offers, and again it goes on to talk about terms of employment, pay, work-related, redundancy and grievances. So we've looked at some of the things there around anti-discrimination. Now let's look what is meant, and that's really if an employer treats you any differently based on your sex or your marriage status or your civil partnership, and or whether or not you've gone through or intend to go through gender reassignment, and that's anybody who wishes to make changes to their sex under medical supervision. So it's important that you have a really good idea about what all those mean. And if you're not sure on any of those issues, it's important to have an open your assessor who will be able to help you identify the right answers and provide some literature for you to support you around any of those issues. Also, that your employer has a good understanding training, you're given the opportunity to reflect on some of those things. And a two-way test, it's not just your employer making based on their characteristics. So moving on to age discrimination, and age discrimination under the Equality Act 2010 means you can't be denied a job or an equal chance for training or promotion based on age, nor can you be harassed or victimised because of this. The Act applies to all employers and private and public sectors and police sectors and vocational training providers, trade unions and professional organisations. However, some work activities may be undertaken by a person over a minimum age. Employers can't discriminate on the basis of age during recruitment. Your skills should be considered rather than your age. So therefore, can't be turned down for a job because of your age, just because of the lack of your skills that you have. And then that would be fair, because obviously if you're applying to be a nurse or a doctor, that would suggest that you've undergone training and you've learnt those skills, which can take a considerable time to obviously learn. So that would be fair to then say, unfortunately, we can't offer you this position because your skill level isn't where it needs to be. You can't be denied or declined on your age. Nor should you treat people less favourably within the workplace. One of the things I hear an awful lot in retail, in hospitality, and in health and social care is the recruitment or the way that we treat young apprentices or young members of staff, where we talk to them and we kind of say, well, you're young, what do you know? Well, age hasn't really got anything to do with it. They very well could have had a lot of experience, and some more than you, within that sector, and therefore it can be just as offensive to a younger person to constantly bring up their age. And if you were a mature person, I'm sure you wouldn't like the fact if a younger person said, well, you're old, what do you know? So therefore, age discrimination is again a two-way process. It's not about how old the person is, but what their experience that they have in the industry. Disability discrimination under the Equal Opportunities Act requires us to not treat anybody less based on disabilities that they may have, but to make reasonable adjustments. And reasonable adjustments may be things such as adaptations, or access in and out the building, or welfare facilities. And obviously not to be bullied, harassed or victimised based on any of their disabilities that they have. So they're just to consider under the Equal Opportunities Act 2010. So moving on away from that, and let's look at some of your employment rights. Well, one of your rights is obviously your work hours and your rest and holiday entitlements. And that falls under the Working Time Directive and the Working Time Regulations Act 1998. And I remember when this act came into force, I was a retail manager at the time, and I think I was working 15, 16 hours a day. And I have to say, I was quite relieved when this act came into place. It was meant to help, obviously, other people in professions such as GPs who work considerably long hours. However, never really came into full force for them due to the exemptions. However, what it does state is that a weekly working hours for an adult cannot be more than 48 hours on an average over a working week, but you may opt out. So if you want to work more than 48 hours, you need to sign a disclaimer form. So that's one of the things that you need to be aware of. It looks at about choosing the time that you work. People that are exempt are usually those in the armed forces, emergency services and police. So if you work within any of those, you tend to be exempt from the working hour directive. If you're domestic servants or in private houses, again, they're exempt. And at-sea transport workers and mobile work highway or lake transport workers. So again, all that where it's harder to take regular breaks are exempt. So what does that mean? Well, there's a special provision within it for young workers, and a young worker may not exceed 8 hours a day or 40 hours a week, and no young worker within a few exceptions can be employed between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. So that's considered a night work, or between the hours of 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. So what is working time? Well, working time includes duties, that is job-related training, work-related travelling time. For example, if you're a sales rep, it doesn't count to and from a job. It's if you're travelling, so from your place of work to your appointment, working lunches, for example, business lunches, however, not your rest breaks. Time spent abroad, if you're working if you're a UK, if you paid somebody to do overtime, or time spent on call at the workplace. Again, there are different rules and different examples there to consider. So the law also states that you must take a rest break, and there's lots of misconceptions over rest breaks. I get asked an awful lot, is it illegal not to have a break every 4 hours? Well, the answer is no, it's not illegal, because that's not what the law says. What the law says around rest breaks is an adult worker can have 20 minutes break if they are expected to work 6 hours or more. This may include your coffee or lunch break. It can be from your workplace and should be in one block, somewhere in the middle of your working day. Your employer can say when the break must be taken. Daily rests are the breaks between one working day and the next. Most people overnight, this should be at least 11 hours of an adult worker. So again, just giving you the break between your shifts going on and going off shift. And again, weekly, it states that weekly rest, when you don't come into work for a full day, e.g. the weekend, this should be for a minimum of an uninterrupted 24 hours in a week, or an uninterrupted 48 hours in a fortnight for an adult worker. There's a lot of misconception around the law, around your regular breaks and things. It's important you understand those rights. So Now we've covered some of those. Hopefully that's helped, and it gives you a bit of a clear idea around what you can and cannot do. Now, looking at maternity, paternity and adoption leave, and again, every employer has a different set of rules for this, and it's useful to probably have a look at your staff handbook to find out what your contract of employment says. However, I can give you some statutory guidelines, and that is SMP, statutory maternity pay, is paid for 39 weeks. For the first 6 weeks, it's usually at 9% of your average weekly earnings, and the remaining 33 weeks at the standard rate or % of your average weekly earnings, whatever is lower. And the standard rate was around 2009 is £124.88. Again, everybody has different rules around there. It's probably important to check. But it is important for you to obviously maternity and paternity and adoption leave. It's available for everybody who is involved within that process. Parents' leave is slightly different, and it's when you are a parent or looking after a child, and parental leave is the right for a parent to take time off work to look after their child or make arrangements for the child's welfare, which is subject to certain criteria. Parents can use to spend more time with their children and strike a better balance between their work and family commitments. Employers get 13 weeks in total for each child. Parents of disabled children should get 18 weeks in total. However, strict rules apply, and when how much time can be given or taken is available until the child reaches the age of 5. Adopted children, again, have placed up to 5 years or until they reach their 18, and again, parents of disabled children can take their 18 weeks until their child reaches 18. Parents can take leave in blocks of 1 week up to a maximum of 4 weeks in any given year. Disabled children be given the leave or periods of 1 day at a time. So, parental leave is a statutory right, and it's something that you'll need to your employer about to make sure that you're meeting their handbook of employment, and you're obviously following the right procedures, and you're giving your employer a chance to obviously cover your shift, and you're not giving it last moment's notice, because there will be rules around booking parental leave. So, moving on into absence and sickness, employees have the right to receive statutory sick pay, and again, statutory sick pay is where you take yourself on sick leave, and you're entitled to sick pay if you are unwell. Employees will need to self-certificate up for the first 7 days of their sickness without going to their local doctor. However, the employer may make recommendations that you see one of their GPs. Doctor sick notes have been replaced with a fit note or a statement for fit to work. This means your doctor can let you know when you're considered able to go back to work under health and safety. Different companies operate different absence and sicknesses and sick pay, but it's important to know that obviously everybody's entitled to statutory sick pay. Data protection and access to personal information. Clearly, you're empowered to look after your personal data and to make sure that it's kept at all times. Under the Freedom of Information Act, you have the right to access your data as and when you require it. So it's important, again, for you to understand the rules around what confidentiality means, what data protection means, and what the Information Act means around you and your roles and responsibilities. So bear that in mind. Now, moving on to the last part within this first section, which is your statutory rights and responsibilities. We just need to look at health and safety, And that's to say that the employer and the employee have a duty to provide a safe working environment under the 1974 Health and Safety Work Act. Again, by now you should have completed your health and safety module, so you should have a really good understanding about what that means, and you should have completed your health and safety in your company induction. So, and in your book it talks about that as well. So that's the end of statutory rights and responsibilities. Just to give a little bit of a recap to the things that we've just covered within that section, because we've covered a fair amount. We've looked at an overview of contracts of employment, and we looked at anti-discrimination and under-discrimination. We looked at age discrimination, disability discrimination, working hours, maternity, paternity, sickness, data protection, and health and safety. We're now going to move on to section 2. So we've done section 1. We're now going to move on to section 2. Now, I'm quite happy if you just pause this, go and grab a cup of coffee or a cup of tea. Don't want to discriminate. And, you can obviously come back. Now, this session really, again, it's just to help understand the wider context of roles and responsibilities, and to give just a little bit of verbal overview to help complete that ERR workbook that I just showed you. So let's look at some documents within your organisation that you should be aware about. So the first one is your contract of employment, and we've already discussed the things that should be on there. The main things that you need to have included in your contract of employment is the grievance procedure you need to follow, and the statement of payments under your workplace. Now, you should be provided with a wage slip if you're being paid, and there are certain things by law that need to appear on the wage slip. The first one is your national insurance number, excuse me, and the second one is your national tax code. And again, if you haven't got those, your employer about those are available for you. We've looked at the within your workplace, the documents that you may also need to be aware about is your duty around reporting issues of bullying, harassment and anti-discrimination, etc. And if you feel that you are being bullied or equal opportunities isn't being applied, then you need to whistleblow and obviously report that, and that might be either directly to your employer or your supervisor as your internal, or you might want to go external and take advice and guidance. You can talk to your assessors and they'll give you some advice and guidance. Or alternatively, you can talk to the CAB. Now, the working hours and the working and holiday entitlement, it's common practice for most employers to give you a holiday entitlement form, and you give a notice period for when you want to take holiday. So keep that in mind when you want to take holiday. Make sure you've had a holiday request form from somewhere. And equally, timesheets. Make sure you keep a copy of your timesheets so you know the hours that you're working as evidence of your 40-hour working directive. And if you see on that you're going over your 48 hours, you obviously need to have a discussion with your line manager on whether or not you're going to continue to work those hours or whether or not you want to opt out. And if you opt out, you need an opt-out form. The other forms that you're going to need to consider and other documentations within your organisations are going to be things around sickness. So what's your sickness procedure? What does that look like? Where are the forms? And obviously, how do you get your sick pay? Other forms that you're going to need to obviously have access to might be Freedom of Information Act. So you might want to have a look at your HR records. You might want to see what's on it. You might be interested in disciplinaries, or you've had any comments about you, and you can check your staff files with Information Act. And again, you might want to just ask your employer, what would that form look like and how would you access that? access that. Under health and safety and reporting of documentation, there are going to be certain forms within there that you should be aware about. And some of those are see. Risk assessments, what are they, where are they, and what do they look like? And your accident and injury reporting forms, again, you should know what they are and where they're kept. So that just gives a brief overview of your documentation within your organisation. We're now going to look at sources of information and advice. So it's clear that you can access a huge amount of information, advice and guidance around employment rights and responsibilities. It's important that you understand your internal policies first. The staff handbook, have you read the policies and procedures handbook? Have you read the quality assurance handbooks? If you have, that's great. Do you have copies of them? Are they available for you? Do you have a staff? That new things going on policies and procedures? If you have, that's brilliant. But if you haven't, where could you go for external support? Well, you might want to go to the Citizens Advice Bureau, you might want to go for training, or you may want to speak to a trade union. And my advice to you there is, if you're looking for advice and guidance, go to your manager for your supervisions and your monthly one-to-one meetings with them. And that way you have a record of the discussions you're having and why you're having them and the outcomes of those. The health and safety, the place that you can go for health and safety issues is the HSC, which is the Health and Safety Executive. And again, you should be looking for your poster at work for that. If you have issues around food or food safety, you can contact your environmental health officer. If you have issues around sales or sales of goods, you could go to trading standards. If you have issues in the care sector, the Care Commission, or education, you can go to Ofsted. So you can see that there is a regulator there for pretty much every industry within the company, within any company. And if you're failing to get a resolution at the management level, then obviously you can go to your regulators to see how they can help. So, things that you should know about your occupation and your organisation really is, what is your occupational area and who is the regulator of that and who is the trade union? So we just touched upon care, and obviously we said the CQC was the Quality Care Commission. And again, they're full of advice and guidance and support around certain issues. And it's pretty important that you understand your occupational area quite clearly. Within your organisation, the things that you should know is who's your manager, who's your supervisor. That's really important. But then you should know other things, such as who's your HR manager, your human resources, who's your health and safety manager, who's in charge of first aid, and who's the fire safety warden, who's your trade union representative. So look at those other parts and try and work out if you know who's within your organisation. You should know how many is in your organisation. You should know your company's missions, values and aims, so you understand that you're part of wider culture and company. Occupations and career paths. Well, within any sector, we have a thing called the generic pathway, and then there's the specialist pathway, and then there's the dual professional pathway. So the first pathway is the generics So within any business, you tend to have business admin roles, team leading roles, supervisor roles, and customer service roles. And you usually have those roles to make a business succeed. You have your occupational roles. So for example, if you're in care, specific care management, or if you're in catering, specific catering chef or licensee. And then you have what we call as a dual professional role, and that's where you may be, for example, a carer, but then you want to be a manager as well. So you can become a manager and a carer, and you become, put the two together, a dual professional. It's important early on in your career to have a good understanding about what you want and where you want to go, and talk to your manager about how you're going to get there. Finally, we're going to look at representative bodies, and we have touched on that anyway. We've had a discussion earlier about who's responsible for what, and it's important you understand who the HS are, the Health and Safety Executive. It's important you understand who the trade unions are, who your consumer groups are, who your regulatory and who your professional regulatory bodies are. So for example, if you wanted to be a manager, you could register with the CMI, which is the Chartered Institute of Managers, and then you would get professional membership to be a manager. If you wanted to be a care manager, you would go to the CQC, the Quality Care Commission. Are you aware that you have professional representatives? In education, we have Ofsted and we have Ofqual, who regulate us, but we also have the IFL, who give us recognition as professionals within industry, and we have our federation, which is the Education and Training Federation. So you can see that there's a lot of looking after specific sectors. The third thing amongst those sectors to be aware about are our sector skill councils, and they're there to look at the industry and decide what we need within the sector for qualifications to train the next generation of staff to move forward. And that's your representative bodies. So, just to recap then this session, within this session then, we looked at statutory rights and responsibilities. We discussed some of the documentations within your organisation. We looked at areas of getting information, and we looked at occupations and your organisations. We looked at career pathways, and we discussed representative bodies. What you need to do now is have a discussion with your assessor around completing your ERR workbook. ERR is usually completed within the first 4 weeks of undertaking any work-based training, and that's to ensure that as you're in a place that is suitable to undertake training and that you understand your rights and your responsibilities. So hopefully this session is useful. If you have any questions, then by all means email me or call me. The ERR workbook that I showed you earlier, and email that back to your tutor, and we'll get you certificated within the next 6 weeks of you achieving it. Thank you very much for watching this session. Sorry you had to see this for the first time, but I felt because it was one of those sessions where it was me talking a lot, it might be nicer to see something rather than just a blank screen. So thanks for watching, and good luck with your qualifications.